This is one of the most incredible cars I've ever driven, period. This was acquired a few years back, and it was actually, I believe, the first Singer that sold at public auction. So if you're familiar or have been to our track days, you've probably seen these cars, especially the Club Sport. And this car gets a ton of track time, and it really is the most plug and play, I want to say, race car that I've ever experienced. A lot of these cars were crashed or raced, and you know, they've made a very limited number of these. I think it was just over 100, 108 or something along those lines. And this has to be the most original one in the world. Antonio is going to highlight the Porsches that are in our Virginia location. So you're not only going to be able to see what we have up here, but some of the cars that are in Virginia that aren't often up here. So get the full glimpse of all of our Porsche collection that we love talking about so much here on the Audrain Network.
So as Sean brought us through the history of the Porsche 356s in Newport, we've actually transported here to Virginia, our other storage facility down here in Virginia, where we keep the rest of the remaining Porsches in the collection. And this kind of was at the beginning of their history. They were making the Porsche tractor right at the same time as the 356, helping to make more money for the company. So kind of humble beginnings here. When you think Porsche, you don't necessarily think of the Porsche tractor, but if you head to the Keystone Truck and Tractor Museum, also here in Virginia, you'll see a Porsche tractor next to a Lamborghini tractor. So everybody kind of knows the famous story of Lamborghini with tractors. It's kind of similar here with Porsche. If you look to my left, we have a Porsche 914-6, and when the 914 came out, a lot of people didn't really consider it a Porsche because it had a 4-cylinder. And I think kind of the answer to that was to put the flat 6 from the 911 at the time in the 914, and it really opened these cars up. I often think as a Boxster owner that this is kind of like the first iteration of the Boxster back in the day, and I know that this car absolutely rips and it looks beautiful in this orange. Moving on, we have the 930 Turbo. This is the cabriolet version. So when the G-Body came out in 70, I believe it was the 74 Paris auto show, they released the 930 Turbo, and then in 75 it was released to Europe. 76 it came to the United States, and they came out with the cabriolet version a little bit shortly after that. And the turbos, of course, they have these wide fenders, wider front track. They needed to put bigger tires, wider tires to have more grip. This is the car that coined the term the Widowmaker, and they're lovely cars. I love the whale tail in the back. This is pretty much, you know, 1980s iconic Porsche, and you just gotta love the 930 Turbo. Moving on, we have the Carrera RS. So this is a 964. The Porsche market in Europe released the Carrera RS, and America did not get the Carrera RS. So it was actually helped by the Porsche Club of America that, I don't want to say complained, but they necessarily, they made a push to get the Carrera RS here in America. So Porsche said, okay, we'll sell the Carrera RS to the North American market, and they named this the RS America. They only did 701 variants of this car. We actually have a video upcoming on the channel where Donald takes this RS America for a spin. At the time, these were not as expensive. It was based on a Carrera 2. It's kind of funny now, you look at the values between a Carrera 2 and a RS America, the values of the RS America are much higher than a Carrera 2. But these are lovely cars to drive. They have a G50 gearbox. If you've ever driven a G-Body Porsche or a 964 with a G50 gearbox, it's quite a pleasure to shift through the gears. So pretty iconic car here for the United States of America. Going down on the 964 line over here, we have the 964 Turbo 3.6. And the 964 Turbo had a 3.3 liter. The later models of the 964 had the 3.6 liter in the Turbo S. This is a pretty rare car. They only did about 1,500 of these, and if you look at the yellow Porsches that we have up in Newport, this would look good sitting with them up there. But again, the 964, I know many people are modifying 964s. I think the more 964s that get modified, the more of the values of the stock cars and the, I would say, regular 964s will go up. But beautiful car in this color. And this was special because it had the yellow seat belts, which you can see on the inside, and also yellow dials as well for the tach and the speedo and so on and so forth. Coming down, we're at the next generation of 993. As we know, the 993 is the last generation of air-cooled 911s. And this car in particular is very special because it is a 993 Turbo S, basically the last hurrah of the turbo of the air-cooled motors. They only made 345 of these cars. Very, very powerful, around 450 horsepower, and very nice to have it here amongst these other great cars. And if we come down a little bit further, we have a pair of 996s. So the 996, the first water-cooled 911. To my right, we have the 996 Turbo, and right in front of me, we have the 996 GT2. The 996, when it first came out, it wasn't really received that well. People didn't like the fried egg headlights. They didn't like that it was water-cooled. It was kind of a sacrilege to move on from the air-cooled cars. Ultimately, as we know, the 996 and also the Cayenne helped progress the Porsche brand, actually save them from bankruptcy. But we have two very exciting models next to us. The Turbo made about 430 horsepower. With the X50 pack, it made about 450 horsepower. Both of these cars are 0.2. I think the look of the 0.2 headlights are a little bit prettier, in my opinion, over the 0.1. But this was the technically the first GT2 model that they released to the public. There were similar GT2-ish models in the 993, but we won't really get there. This car is an absolute beast. With the Turbo, it's an all-wheel drive car. Basically, you take the Turbo and you remove the front diff with the GT2, so it's rear-wheel drive. So these are quite a handful to drive and significantly faster than the equivalent GT3 of the era. And they both look pretty sinister in black. So moving on from the 996s, we've jumped up a generation to the 997. Many people regard this as the holy grail 911. It was kind of the, as Jay Leno, our friend, would say, it's kind of the last days of old technology are better than the first days of new technology. This is the last 911 that you could get with hydraulic steering before they moved over to electronically assisted steering. And next to me is a 997.1 GT2, and right next to that is the 997.1 GT3 RS. And we just did a video on this GT2 and the GT3 RS. Donald drove the GT3 RS, and Ben Chester and Donald drove the GT2. And I actually got a ride in this GT2, and I can say it's incredibly fast. The 997 generation is my favorite generation of 911. We've featured the 3.8 liter 997.2 GT3 RS on the channel where Sean and I drove it. And I can say that these cars are extremely direct. The front end feels amazing. And the way that they sound is incredible. It's a really visceral driving experience. So the 997.1 GT3 RS has a 3.6 liter flat six. The 0.2 had a 3.8. These cars rev up really fast, even the GT2. And they're incredible cars, and I think we've seen in the way that these cars have gone up in value and how much they're loved, how much people really, really enjoy both of these cars. And I love the way that they look as well. I think they're quite beautiful. as we come down the line here, this is the 991.2 GT3. So as Sean referenced, the 991 911R, which is a 0.1 car, that was supposed to be the last manual transmission GT Porsche that you could buy. And people were flipping them and making a lot of money, and Porsche wasn't too happy about that. So they ultimately listened to their customers who really wanted another GT Porsche with a 6-speed manual. And when they came out with the 991.2, they brought the manual back. So I'm sure the people that bought 911Rs for double the money that Porsche was asking for weren't too happy about that, but it's nice to see that in a brand like Porsche, you can still get a manual transmission. You can't get a manual transmission Lamborghini or Ferrari. This one in particular is pretty special. It has the graphics package that has been optioned. Also the bucket seats and houndstooth center inserts, which is pretty cool. I also think it's a pretty beautiful looking car as well. The front bumper design of the 0.2, in my opinion, looks better than the 0.1. It looks a little bit more aggressive with the way that these plastic air ducts are, and also the way that the front bumper is angled downwards, whereas the 0.1 is angled upwards. But there is one more car that we'll take a look at as well in the Porsche collection here. So the final car that we'll look at today is this 1995 Cremer K8, which is the last air-cooled Porsche endurance race car, which makes it pretty special. And this specific car won the 1995 Rolex 24-hour Daytona endurance race. The story was that the Ferraris at the time were favored to win, but ultimately they had some issues, and the Porsche claimed the victory. And I'm sure that Donald wasn't too thrilled with Porsche beating Ferrari as I am. But very, very special car. It's pretty amazing to look at the performance figures. This car weighed about 2,000 pounds, and with the twin turbo, I believe it made around 450 to 500 horsepower. So I'm sure it's an absolute rocket ship, but it would be an honor to drive this, but I don't think they would let me do that. But I hope you enjoyed looking at our Porsches and kind of getting a glimpse at the Audrain Collection's cars. And if you haven't subscribed, make sure that you subscribe to the Audrain Museum Network. We do a lot of videos in our museum. We go to events. We feature our collections cars. We drive cars. We do podcasts. We have a lot of exciting things going on. And I would love it if you subscribe to the channel. And thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.